Okay, so you know those like super ornate porcelain dolls that you always see in antique shops? Those always kind of creep me out, not gonna lie.
Uh-huh. Yeah, I get that.
But you know, it's even wilder. Turns out those things are like just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to like the whole world of doll making.
Right. I know.
Ah,
Like, honestly, when I first saw this RoleCatcher thing, I was picturing, like a sweet grandma with a needle and thread.
yeah, yeah, totally.
But this is like next level stuff. I mean, we're
Right.
talking design, engineering, even client management. Like, who knew?
It's kind of amazing though, right? Like you don't really think of something like doll making as being this whole career path.
Yeah, and you'd think it would be like one specific thing, but the more we dig into these RoleCatcher files, the more you realize how diverse it actually is.
Mhm.
Like some doll makers work in these amazing studios, others are in like high-tech workshops with 3D printers and all this crazy equipment I can't even imagine.
Wait, hold on. 3D printers for dolls?
Yeah.
What?
Yeah, for real. It's not all like hand-stitched dresses and stuff. They're using technology to create molds, to experiment with different materials, even to design virtual dolls. It's pretty wild.
Okay, you totally lost me at virtual dolls, but we can circle back to that later. For now, let's stick with the basics. Like, what does a doll maker actually do all day?
Well, I mean, the obvious answer is they make dolls.
Hmm.
But the source uses some pretty interesting verbs here. Like they talk about designing, obviously, but also creating and even like repairing.
Repairing.
Yeah, like these are just toys, right? Some of these dolls are like actual works of art meant to last for generations.
Huh, interesting. Okay, so it's not just about sewing then. What other materials do they use?
Oh man, it's so varied. We're talking porcelain, wood, even plastics. I mean, think about all the different skills involved in working with those.
Right, like you could be a master woodcarver or something, and also a doll maker. Talk about a unique skill set.
Speaking of skills, did you
Hmm.
notice how much they emphasize math and engineering in this? Oh, for sure. I mean, when you think about it, it makes sense, right? Like, you got to figure out the proportions, the weight distribution, how to make things move. It's not as simple as it looks.
That is so wild. It's like art meets science.
Totally. And honestly, I think that's what makes this whole thing so fascinating.
So we've talked about like the materials and the skills and all that, but how do you actually like get into this whole doll making thing? Is it something you go to school for?
Well, it can be. There are definitely some, like, formal design programs out there that focus on toy design or even specifically on doll making.
Oh, wow, really?
Yeah, but RoleCatcher also talks about how, like, a lot of doll makers are self-taught,
Yeah.
Like they just have this passion and they figure it out as they go.
That's pretty cool. It feels like one of those things where experience is probably just as valuable as like a fancy degree.
Totally. And they actually break down a doll making career into like these different stages. They have entry level, junior doll maker, and then senior doll maker.
Okay, that makes sense. So if you're just starting out, you're entry level.
Exactly. You're probably working with a more experienced doll maker, maybe assisting them, learning the ropes. It's a lot of like hands-on training, I'd imagine.
So like an apprenticeship almost.
Yeah, kind of. And then as you gain more experience and confidence, you move up to junior doll maker.
And that's where you get to like really start developing your own style, right?
Exactly. You're probably taking on more independent projects, experimenting with different materials and techniques. And, this is where all that math and engineering knowledge comes in handy, figuring out how to make everything work together.
Yeah, you don't want your doll like tipping over or anything.
Right. And then finally, you reach the pinnacle of your career, senior doll maker.
Okay, so what does a senior doll maker actually do? Like, do they just make like really big dolls?
Uh-huh. No, not exactly. I mean, they might make big dolls if that's their thing, but at this level, you're kind of like the boss.
Oh, wow, I see.
You might have your own studio, or maybe you're leading a team of other doll makers. You're probably also mentoring younger artists, sharing your expertise.
So it's like you've mastered the craft and now you're passing on that knowledge to the next generation.
Exactly.
Mm.
It's pretty amazing when you think about it.
Yeah, it really is. So we've covered like a lot of ground here. We've talked about the skills, the career path, but let's talk about the elephant in the room.
What's that?
Money. Like, how
What's up?
much do doll makers actually make?
The
Oh.
age-old question, right?
Yeah.
Well, it's tricky because it really depends on so many factors. Like, are you selling your dolls online at craft fairs to collectors? Are you making one-of-a-kind pieces or like larger production runs?
Right, right. That makes sense.
But RoleCatcher does mention that some doll makers, especially those who are really well known or who specialize in like high-end collectible dolls, can earn a pretty decent living.
So it sounds like there's potential to make a living, but it's not like, get-rich-quick scheme or anything.
Definitely not. Like any creative field, it takes a lot of like hustle and dedication.
Yeah, for sure. And probably a good bit of business sense too, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Like RoleCatcher talks about how important it is for doll makers to like understand their market, to build relationships with collectors, and even to like manage their finances and all that stuff.
So it's not just about being really good at making dolls, it's about being like a business owner too.
That's it. And that's probably why they emphasize things like networking and building an online presence so much.
Right, which makes total sense in today's world. Like, even if you make the most amazing dolls ever, if nobody knows about them, you're not going to sell any.
Exactly. Okay, but can we talk about the tech stuff for a sec?
Oh, yeah, the virtual dolls. We're still circling back to that.
Yes. So I know it sounds kind of out there,
Hmm.
but some doll makers are using AR and VR to create like digital versions of their dolls.
Okay, I'm still trying to wrap my head around that. Like, what's the appeal of a virtual doll?
Well, think about it. Like some people are super into dolls, but they might not have the space for a huge collection. Or maybe they're worried about their kids, breaking them or whatever.
Mm. Yeah, that's fair. I guess virtual dolls would solve that problem.
Right. And plus it opens up all these possibilities for like interactive experiences and
Mm.
stuff. Like imagine a virtual doll that you can like dress up in style on your phone or something.
Whoa, that's kind of cool, actually. Okay, so the tech stuff is definitely changing the game here, huh?
For sure. And I think that's the biggest takeaway from all of this. Like doll making might seem like this very traditional old school kind of craft, but it's actually constantly evolving.
Yeah, you're right. And it just goes to show that no matter what your passion is, whether it's doll making or something else entirely, there's always room for creativity, innovation, and like even a little bit of tech.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And honestly, I think that's a really inspiring message. Like, don't be afraid to experiment, to try new things, and to see where your passions might take you.
Well said. This is a deep dive I won't soon forget. Super fascinating stuff.
Me neither. Always fun to explore something unexpected.